Welcome in This Week in Indiana Football, Episode 4. It is August 30th, 2021. We're officially in game week for the Indiana Hoosiers after having Week 0 this past weekend. Remember, we're powered by Indiana Sports Beat Radio. You can listen every Monday through Friday on YouTube, 9 to 11. You can also hear us, the pre-recorded version of the show, in the afternoons in Evansville on WREF and 88.9 WBRO in Marengo. I'm joined once again by Dustin Schutte of Saturday Tradition, and we got a special guest this week, Jeffrey the Greek from the Eyes on Big Ten podcast. How you doing, guys?
I'm doing great, John. It's always a pleasure to be here.
I'm doing great as well. Jeffrey the Greek, Eyes on Big podcast. Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay. So it's Eyes on Big, not Eyes on Big Ten.
Yep, Eyes, EYES, on Big, B1G. We cover all 14 teams. I'm the co-host along with Jeffrey the Greek. So any Hoosier fans or just general Big Ten fans, we'd love for you to check us out.
I would say this about the podcast, too, that it's probably the most comprehensive, the best Big Ten podcast out there. I don't let an episode go by without listening. So definitely as part of a follow on Twitter if you can.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with go ahead.
I was going to say, I obviously paid Dustin to say that. So he's making his
NIL deal for somebody who's not in college. Anyway, so for those of you who don't know, Jeffrey the Greek, he's not only a podcaster, but he's a former player for Iowa, who obviously Indiana is playing this weekend. He played from 1996 to 2000 as a defensive back. And I told him earlier before we started, I was born in 1997. So it's kind of weird. You got a big generational gap between me and Dustin and Jeffrey today.
Yeah, and I wasn't planning on drinking before this podcast. But now that I might have one or two. But yeah, I played in the late 90s. I like to usually tell people I finished playing in the early 2000s. That doesn't mean much.
So there was a lot to look forward to this weekend. There was a lot that happened this past weekend. I don't really know where to start. I would say let's go back and let's do a brief little recap of Week 0 and specifically the Illinois-Nebraska game. I think it definitely lived up to the hype that people were talking about. Not obviously for the sense of Nebraska, but for just the sheer competitiveness that it was. We had to see Brett Bielema ball back in the Big Ten. We got to see the same old movie as Scott Frost was talking about with Nebraska, and Adrian Martinez particularly was a part of that same old movie, I would say. So what were your guys' takeaways from that game for yourselves?
Well, first of all, I would like to point out that I was right all off season long. I said Illinois was going to win that game, and I still think that they're a bowl eligible team. I was impressed with how they played defensively, but I think the big story from that game was Artur Sitkowski, King Art, as I like to call him, to come in a situation where you're the backup quarterback playing for a new program that's under new direction with a guy like Brett Bielema, to come in and complete 12 of 15 passes with 2 touchdowns and for like 125 yards, somewhere in that neighborhood. Not great, but I think it speaks to his confidence level, to his comfort level with that staff, with the offense. And then obviously Brett Bielema putting him in a position to win. And to me, it contrasts everything we saw from the Nebraska side and everything we saw from Adrian Martinez. This is a kid who's a fourth-year starter. At one point in his career, he was thought to be a Heisman, maybe not a Heisman favorite, but a Heisman candidate. He goes 16 of 32. There are times he was throwing to receivers and the football didn't even land in the same zip code. So that's a big problem. I don't think the offense, he hasn't developed. I don't think the offense works really that well for him. So there's a lot of trouble brewing right now in Lincoln with Scott Frost, because I've said this all off season too. If Nebraska couldn't beat Illinois, you look at their schedule and you start to see you still have to play Oklahoma. You still have to play Ohio State and Michigan in crossover games. Oh, and by the way, you still have Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Northwestern. All 4 teams are going to be pretty good in your same division. So it's difficult for me to see 6 wins right now. That could obviously change, but I was not impressed by anything I saw from Nebraska on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good breakdown of the schedule, because anybody that was predicting Nebraska to win 6, 7, I've seen 8 games, I can pretty much assure you they were predicting Illinois to be one of those.
Absolutely.
They already took one of those away, and the schedule just gets that much harder. I'll just give a little bit of more of a shout out to Illinois. we had kind of compared on our podcast how much better Rutgers looked in 2020 as compared to 2019, the Shiano effect, if you will. And I was curious all offseason, how much better Illinois would look in the first game this year as compared to the last 5 years under Lovey. I think I saw it, quite honestly, I don't think Rutgers was lower on the totem pole than Illinois was. I mean, Illinois had won a lot more games, so there wasn't as drastic of a difference, but the little things you need to see out of a good team, essentially limiting their mistakes, tailoring the game plan towards the strength of the players that they have on the roster. I thought that was on full display from Bielema and his staff. Then you mix that in with the, aforementioned bloopers that we got out of Nebraska on Saturday, and that's how they walked out of there with a win.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing that I've gotten out of the aftermath of this game, I saw it on Twitter earlier today. I didn't see Scott Frost's press conference, but I did see this comment that he made during his press conference. He said he saw the way that Illinois lined up. I don't know if it was offense or defense, but the way that they lined up and their game plan just went out the door. I don't know how that even happens for any team.
Yeah, and that's something that you think maybe, but you don't say out loud. And it also speaks to his complete inability, I think, to game plan, to make adjustments. I didn't think, and I'm not a football guru, right? I don't know the X's and O's as well as a lot of other people out there, but it didn't look like Illinois was being all that complex on offense or defense. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't shut them down better on the defensive side. Obviously, Nebraska had some mistakes, but to me, I just saw a team in Illinois that was getting after. Like, I saw these guys playing with a purpose. To me, I saw an aggressive team. And you mentioned this on your podcast, Jeff, is the fact that, Tony Adams made the comment that they can throw multiple looks at the offense, and that kind of maybe confused Nebraska a little bit. But when you look at the talent discrepancy, like, I think Nebraska's far more talented than Illinois is, but I just saw a hungrier team. I saw a team that was more disciplined, a team that Brett Bielema came in and he was like, we can't turn the ball over. We can't have these dumb penalties. We can't shoot ourselves in the foot. And Illinois was the smarter team. It was the more disciplined team. But the fact that you can't figure out what Illinois is doing by halftime when you're in your fourth season and you've played this team a couple different times, and go back to his Wisconsin days, go back to his Arkansas days, go back to Ryan Walters' days at Missouri. I mean, a lot of the same stuff that was implemented under those schemes or under those regimes you saw on Saturday. So it was really a curious statement, especially to put it out in the public like that. But that's another same movie. He's said a lot of curious things over the course of his 3 years. This is just another to add to the list.
Yeah, there's not much I can add there. I will just boil it down as simple as I can. A coach coaching in his first game beat a coach that was coaching to start his fourth year. That's probably about all many, not all, but many Nebraska fans have to hear to be frustrated, and I don't blame them at this point.
One other thing I want to go ahead and shout out before we move on and get into this Indiana-Iowa preview that we got coming up. Outside of Illinois and Nebraska, Zach Charbonnet, the transfer from Michigan, went off for UCLA in his first game. And it seems like you got a lot of Michigan fans wondering, was the problem him, or was the problem Michigan, or was UCLA just utilizing him better?
That is interesting because that's something that we had talked a lot between my buddies and I on Saturday night. How much better Sitkowski, aka Swagkowski, looked, and what was the difference? Coaching, right? I mean, I can't imagine that Archer has fixed his mechanics to the degree that it would unlock his quarterback skills, right? It was the scheme and the system around him. I think some of that same stuff could probably be applied to Charbonnet moving out west to UCLA. Gets a little bit more of a crease in that Chip Kelly offense, and finally his skills are on display.
I would add that I'm going to say I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that one because he was his freshman year. He set the freshman rushing touchdown record at Michigan. I think he had 12 in 2019. He didn't look as explosive, but if you watch that UCLA-Hawaii game, I mean, Hawaii was really bad. So it could be a combination of the fact that he is really talented. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, we saw what he was capable of in 2019 at Michigan, but I just think it's too early to tell right now just because when you watched Hawaii, that was a bad football team. So I think it's still too early to tell what kind of season he's going to have. But he did flash his potential. I mean, 106 yards on 6 carries and 3 touchdowns, that's hard to beat.
Speaking of bad teams, what was with Eddie George choosing UConn to beat Fresno State on College game day?
I mean, it had to be some sort of joke. But I mean, it wasn't like he put serious thought. Clearly, he did not put serious thought.
He said just because.
I guess 600 plus days wasn't enough to have him. Maybe if we get 900 plus days at some point, he'll pick it.
Well, they were coming off a national championship, so.
Former Indiana offensive coordinator Kalen DeBoer also running the program out there at Fresno State.
That's right.
So that's good to see for Indiana fans, hoping that he may eventually rise up in the echelons of college football head coaching. But let's go ahead and put all that aside. Let's get into why we're here. Indiana, Iowa, the much talked about matchup that fans have been looking forward to since the end of last season, since they knew this was happening. A lot of people on the Indiana side are referring to it as the Gary Barta Bowl after what went down last year with the College Football Playoff Committee not showing them any love, giving Iowa State, of all teams, a bunch of extra leeway than instead of the Hoosiers. So a lot of fans really want to shove it in Gary Barta's face from the Hoosier perspective. But outside of that, let's set the stage a little bit. The Hawkeyes against Indiana have won 3 straight, most recently 42-16 in 2018 in Bloomington. So not a good showing for Indiana. That was when Tom Allen was in his, I think, 2nd season. And the Hoosiers' last one, 24-21 in 2012. I attended that game. That was also in Bloomington, a very cold one, if I remember correctly. So that's in terms of the recent series. They haven't played too many times in the past several years, but they played enough. And then I would say Penix returning from injury. That's one of the biggest storylines on the Indiana side. And then Spencer Petras for Iowa. How is he going to do in terms of playing in front of a crowd? And then we're going to go through our keys. I'm going to give my keys for Indiana here in a bit. I'll have you, Jeffrey the Greek, give me your keys for Iowa. But overall, what are you guys just looking forward to see about this game being week 1 and being a conference game as well? So,
well, from the conference standpoint, I think it's going to determine, well, I shouldn't say that it's going to determine who's a contender because I think both of these teams are really good football teams. And the nice thing about this game is the Big Ten did a smart thing. In a lot of these week 1 games, all of these week 1 games, actually, you see it's cross division. It's Ohio State, Minnesota. It's Iowa, Indiana. It's Wisconsin, Penn State, Northwestern, Michigan State. So you could potentially lose this game and still win your division. So that's kind of a good thing that you have going in that regard. I think, to me, when I look at these two teams, I mean, there are in my opinion, a lot of certainties on the defensive side for both teams. I think that Indiana's defense is the strength. I think Iowa's defense is the strength. I think of Indiana's strength on the defense, it's the secondary. I think it's the same for Iowa. You talk about this all the time. You mentioned this. I'm stealing your little comparison here, Greek. It's the Spider-Man meme a little bit, right, on that side of the ball. So it's going to be interesting to me to see which team is better coached defensively. Typically, that's been Iowa. Phil Parker is outstanding at his job. The fact that he's not consistently, one of the top assistants for or one of the top names for the Broyles Award is a crime. But I do think that Indiana, when you look at what they did last season, forcing 17 interceptions, getting a boatload of turnovers, this is going to be a fun game in terms of that old school defense, Big Ten style. I have a lot of questions about both quarterbacks. Is Michael Penix 100% healthy? And then I do think Spencer Petras playing in his first game in front of a crowd is a big deal. I mean, he was a starter last season. He played much better the final 4 or 5 games than he did the first 4 or 5 games. But I think if Indiana can get to him early, kind of rattle him a little bit, that might have an impact. And if Iowa's defense brings the pressure and is able to affect Penix, I mean, who knows? That knee might start hurting. He might start rushing passes or rushing plays. It's just incredibly interesting, and it's one of the spicier games I think we'll see in week 1, not just in the Big Ten, but across college football.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a Spider-Man meme with the defenses, both strong, pretty much front to back. But that Spider-Man meme quickly goes away when you compare the offenses, because where Iowa has the strength, which is at the offensive line and running back, is what the weakness would be for Indiana. Conversely, Indiana has a seasoned big play quarterback with seasoned big play targets to hit, whereas Iowa is got some, experience back at the pass catcher, but a quarterback that still very much has to prove himself. So, it's very much opposite on comparing the offenses to each other. And then one thing I want to add is, as far as the Barta Bowl is concerned, I can speak for, I can't speak for all Iowa fans. I don't know who could do that, but I can speak for myself and a ton of my buddies and, brothers and whatnot. There's no animosity that we have towards Indiana fans.
I wouldn't think there would be, because it's not like Gary Barta was favoring the Hawkeyes last year,
right?
Putting them over Indiana. I think that would be a little different if there was some direct impact. If Iowa had a chance of getting the college football playoff.
Well, and he's more of the thing with that is, I understand, because he's the face of it. But he's also not the one that makes that decision. He basically speaks on behalf of the committee. It's kind of like
Mark Emmert in the NCAA.
So, yeah,
he just takes all the fire.
I understand. So I get the, and it gives Indiana that extra motivation, right? It's something for the locker room, or for something for Tom Allen to cling to. But in terms of from the fans' perspective, I mean, Gary Barta just basically tells them what that selection room behind closed doors tells them to tell them on ESPN.
Well, I don't think it's going to motivate Indiana, the football team itself, anymore. I think it's more from a fan perspective. That's what I'm speaking on for the Gary Barta situation.
I think Gary Allen will grab any flimsy thing he can to post into a locker room and turn into motivation. Yep. So I might disagree with you just a skosh there with that. But another thing I can say is, I can assure you, Iowa fans in no way, shape, or form want Iowa State to be favored over any team in anything. So, definitely didn't enjoy that at all.
So, Greek, let me get your thing on something, or your opinion on something. Do you think Tom Allen is too much? Kind of going off what you're saying. It seemed like Scott Frost was kind of leaning towards that with PJ Fleck specifically, and maybe a little bit of Tom Allen as well during Big Ten Media Days. Do you, from someone on the outside of Indiana, do you think he's a bit too eccentric for the league that he's in and for the type of teams that he wants to coach?
I don't mean to take a pass with this answer, but I mean, what does it matter what I think? I'm an old dude sitting in my basement. It matters. I mean, it matters what the guys in the locker room think.
That's true. Yeah.
The message is for 18 to 23-year-olds, and the Leo thing is a big deal. When I was at Iowa, when Coach Ferentz got there, it was break the rock. You hit a rock 1,000 times and it breaks on the 1,000th time. It's not the 1,000th hit that broke it, but the 99 that went before. That was our thing. It was like, just keep chipping away until you break the rock. There's quotes and sayings and things that coaches use all over the place. Leo with Tom Allen, the players are obviously bought in. The program has obviously taken a step up. It's hard to fake that much team cohesion that they seem to have in that locker room. So it doesn't matter what I think. It seems to be working for them.
Yeah, and I agree. And I guess with that, I'll go ahead and dive into my personal keys for Indiana as they get ready to take on Iowa this Saturday. The number one key, and I think this is probably pretty obvious, protect Michael Penix. If he goes out and they're calling run options or whatever you want to call them, they're going to have him scrambling around and putting his body in trouble. That's dangerous. It doesn't, Iowa, with the strong defensive line they have, or whoever else it may be, if Penix gets hurt, that ruins the entire season for the Hoosiers. Jack Tuttle is a decent backup. But go ahead, Dustin.
I was going to jump in, and I will tell you, I will make a bold prediction that if they run a run-pass option at any point in that game, Nick Sheridan will not be returning to Bloomington on the airplane.
So do you think, though, so Iowa's going to be obviously giving a lot of defensive pressure. Do you think that they'll just have him take it? Obviously, he's going to want to throw it away, or do you think that he would run out?
But you're asking me if I think that they're not going to run Penix. I can't imagine at all. Like it's I'm going to use the reference from the movie Hoosiers. If Gene Hackman walks up to Stroud and says, "Don't shoot the ball unless you're wide open underneath the basket." That's going to be the message to Michael Penix. Don't run unless there's, you have 30 yards of green grass and you have no options whatsoever down the field. And if you do have to run, get down immediately, get out of bounds. Don't try to be the hero, because getting a first down in the second quarter, that doesn't matter. What matters is staying upright, staying healthy for the course of 12 games. He's never done that in his career. So, like I said, if Michael Penix has more than 5 rushing yards, I'll be surprised, because I think they want to get the ball out of his hands unless there's a clear opening where he can run. I don't care how much he trusts his knee, how much he trusts his health and the training staff. When you've been injured as much as he has, you have to stay upright. You can't take those kind of chances.
So I want to be
interesting to see how. Okay, Jeffrey.
I want to make sure I articulate this correctly. Never in my time at Iowa did a defensive coach, defensive coordinator say, "Hey, this guy's got a bad knee, go for it." Never heard that one time. With that being said, when you knew there was a player coming back, especially a quarterback from an injury, there is a situation where you say, okay, we're going to come at him a little bit to see how this person reacts, how they move around. Because if a defensive coordinator gets a sense pretty early in the game that a part of that guy's game is gone, they're going to adjust the defensive plan to say, okay, we don't need to worry about his legs getting out and the pocket anymore. We can adjust the type of blitz packages we have to not worry so much about a mobile quarterback. That is what Phil Parker is going to be looking at early in this game to see what Penix looks like. And then, we're all going to be looking for that. Now, I hope, Penix plays a clean, healthy season all year long, and this game included. But it's something we're going to have to look for.
It's going to be interesting to see how disciplined Penix actually is in case he is given that opportunity to run. If Iowa openly gives that to him, and if he takes it, and if he ends up having issues where he's not doing good with his passes and connecting with his wide receivers, will Indiana's run game be able to show improvement this year? Will Stephen Carr, the transfer from USC, be able to show that that could be that feature back that he couldn't be at USC because he was injured? And Indiana does have an improved offensive line. It's not one of the best, but you have Matthew Bedford up front. You have Zach Carpenter, a transfer in from Michigan. I think if Indiana struggles at all in the passing game, Stephen Carr is going to be given a very good opportunity to show what he can do. And if the Iowa defensive line can do something about it.
Well, I've said this before too. I think I said it on the last podcast, actually, is Indiana has to have some semblance of a rushing attack, because Iowa's secondary is too good to just sit there and throw the ball 40, 45 times a game. Michael Penix will probably get picked off 2 or 3 times if that's the case. So it's not like Indiana has to rush for 200, 250 yards. It just has to be a threat. And I think what you saw last weekend in the Nebraska-Illinois game was a good example of that. I mean, maybe that might not be the perfect comparison there, but Illinois just kind of chipped away. They were able to get 2 or 3 yards, and they were able to get 8 or 9 yards, and they were able to get 1 or 2 yards. They just have to be able to have that threat that we can rip off a 10, 15-yard run. We can pick up first downs on the ground. If they can't do that, if Iowa's defensive line and their linebackers start hitting the running backs in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage, it's going to be a really long day, because while I think they can score points through the air, it's just they're going to start to read that. And like I said, Phil Parker coaches that secondary so well, there's going to be a couple interceptions that you can't have in a game where the margin of error is so slim.
Yeah, you win games in the Big Ten 2 ways. Number one, just flat out having more talent than the other team, or the second one is being a balanced team offensively, defensively, running the ball and passing the ball. In Ohio State's case, all of the above, right? With Iowa, but that, Iowa has been typically, as much as possible, a very balanced team. Will Indiana be able to do that this year? Will they be able to stay balanced on offense? I got no issues with their defense. I mean, D-line, linebackers, the secondary, this is a excellent defense. I expect them to at least be in the top 4 in the Big Ten, if not, the top 1 or 2. So on the offensive side of the ball, we've seen the big plays out of the offense. Okay. The big plays from Indiana's offense in the passing game. What does Iowa's defense absolutely excel at. Okay, I don't think I'm a homer. You can look up the stats from the last 3 or 4 years. They excel at not giving up the big plays to the opposing offense. So I can assure you that Phil Parker, defensive tenant, will be there on Saturday afternoon. And then if that's the case, then it puts the pressure on the Indiana offensive line and rushing attack. To me, that's where the biggest key to that game is.
And 2 other things I want to take note of. I would say the takeaway margin or the turnover margin. I say takeaway margin because Tom Allen puts an emphasis on using the term takeaway for some reason instead of a turnover. I guess it's a positive reinforcement kind of thing. And then combined with that, special teams. I learned in Tom Allen's press conference today that Iowa last year was the #1 team in the conference on special teams, followed by Indiana, #2. And this is definitely one of those games where you could see it coming down to someone hitting a last-second field goal, a bad snap that results in somebody getting a touchdown for the other team, just like we saw with Illinois and Nebraska this past week. And so those 2 things could very well be the difference right there. Can Indiana create those takeaways that they were so apt for last year? I don't know that they'll get 17 this season, not to mention 17 in 8 games. But if they can get 1 or 2 and stay in the positive turnover margin, not create their own turnovers, and hopefully not have any gaffes on special teams, I think that could be the difference for this game.
Yeah, LeVar Woods, the special teams coach of Iowa, has done an excellent job for several years now. New kicker. We have a punter that is half punter, half magician. We love him very much, Torrey Taylor. But yeah, special teams. And then when Iowa's defense is good, it's just good. But what makes it excellent is turnovers. That's when they turn into an excellent defense. And yet, of the 2 defenses, I'm not so sure Indiana is more dependent on turnovers even more than Iowa. So you hit the nail on the head. The hidden plays, as they say, and then turnovers will be huge in this game.
Dustin, I know you don't really have a ball in this court at all, but if there's anything, or actually, hold on, let me reverse this for a second. Jeffrey the Greek, have we talked about all of your keys, or what else would you like to add from the Iowa perspective of things? Because I realized I kind of jumped the gun right there.
Yeah, I mean, just quick personnel stuff. Shout out to our middle linebacker, Jack Campbell. I think he's criminally underrated on the defensive side of the ball. Iowa fans are pretty good at staying quietly confident on players. I might be kind of loudly confident on players, and he would be one of them. Secondary, I honestly think we have 8 guys that we feel good about starting in the secondary. The D-line is a question. I mean, we've got 1 stalwart at defensive end and Zach Valkenburg. But after that, it's a rotation of talented but young dudes. And then on the other side of the ball, very much like Tyler Goodson, we've got an All-American center up the middle. I think the offensive line is built very much in the middle. The tackles are new. The tackles in pass pro is something that Iowa fans, including myself, will be nervous about. And then I think we have very steady, good pass catchers. I don't see a gigantic difference maker in the pass catchers. So if we move the ball down the field in the passing game, it's going to be more of a meticulous moving down the field as opposed to big plays.
And do you think that Tyler Goodson has to have a phenomenal game in order for this to be something that Iowa wins? Specifically, if Spencer Petras isn't obviously maybe not taking that next step yet, because Iowa has been notorious for – is that your kiddos in the background?
Yeah.
But Iowa has been notorious, and I guess you could definitely look at last year. They don't always start off the season well. So do you think that Tyler Goodson has to be that guy in game 1 for Iowa?
I mean, obviously, Tyler Goodson's going to play a huge part of the offense. That's both running and receiving. He's a big-time receiving threat. People kind of forget that. I can tell you this much. If Tyler Goodson does not have a big game, does not get in the end zone, it would be hard-pressed for me to think that Iowa's had a very successful day on offense. And it would just put that much more pressure on the defense. So yeah, Tyler Goodson's got to be good.
And then I guess I can kind of get everybody's answer for this. If there's one player that for Indiana or Iowa that has to do good in order for them to win, who is that? Dustin, you haven't spoken in a while. If you want to weigh in on that, who do you think it would be for either team or both teams?
Well, I think I think we know Michael Penix can play well. I think we know Indiana's wide receivers can play well. I think what we have to see is the running game. I don't think it's necessarily one player on the Indiana side. I mean, we talk about Stephen Carr. We're going to talk about Tim Baldwin Jr., talk about David Ellis. They have some guys in the backfield that they can filter in and out. But they have to establish, like I said, some semblance of a run game, because I just don't think you can beat. I mean, Purdue has done it, I guess, a few times. I don't mean to bring that up in the beast of David Bell. But you typically are not going to beat Iowa if you're throwing the ball 45, 50 times per game. But so I do think Indiana has to establish some sort of rushing attack. On the other side, on the flip side, to me, it comes obviously the ground game is important, right? But I think it still comes down to Spencer Petras. What version of him are we going to see? Are we going to see the first 2 or 3 game version of Spencer Petras that we saw last year, or are we going to see the guy who led Iowa to 6 straight wins at the end of the season? And I know some people say that winning games is not a quarterback stat. I tend to disagree with that. But I think if he plays it, he doesn't have to be phenomenal. He doesn't have to be great. He has to be Art Sitkowski. He has to complete, 60% of his passes. Don't turn the ball over. Maybe you throw a touchdown pass here or two and kind of show your ability to stretch the field. I think if he can do that, I think Iowa's got a great chance to win. But man, like I said, this game has such a small margin for error. You could put this on so many different players, in my opinion.
Greek, I know we already talked about Tyler Goodson, but is there anybody else? And maybe it is Tyler Goodson, but who has to be that go-to guy, or maybe not a go-to guy, but who has to be a difference maker in this specific game for Iowa?
Before I get to that, did you guys notice I just broke down the whole team, defense to offense, and literally did not bring up the quarterback? I must have done that subconsciously. That's got to be the first for anybody's broke down their offense. But yeah, I mean, definitely Tyler Goodson is the centerpiece. The one other player another player that you always got to talk about, right, is an Iowa tight end, and Sam Laporta is a very good tight end, and we've got a couple young tight ends after that the Iowa coaches and fans are very confident about. Luke Lachey, we'll see if he shows how much they make him a part of the offense. And then I'd like to point out Tyrone Tracy Jr. He was very much a big part of the offense 2 years ago in a condensed version of the playbook last year in the weird year. The second and third receivers just didn't play quite as much, but I think Tyrone Tracy Jr., very much an upperclassman. I think he's poised to break out for a nice season.
All right, Greek, I know we've kind of kept you longer than we anticipated. I know you've got things going on, but we definitely appreciate you staying on and giving us your perspective on the Hawkeyes. And one last thing before you go, who do you think is going to win Saturday?
So I'm going to plug myself and the podcast one more time. I'm Jeffrey the Greek at Jeffrey the Greek on Twitter. It's the Eyes on Big. That's B1G podcast that I do with Big Kurt. If you gave us enough listens, I think you would point out that I don't think I'm an overt homer. I mean, I definitely am a gigantic Hawkeye fan. I'm certainly capable of picking against Iowa. I picked them second in the division this year and last year. So I'm trying to set up the fact that I feel pretty good.
I think I know where this is going, and I don't think that there's no shame in picking the team that you want to win. There's no shame in that.
I just picture every Indiana fan or whatever like, here we go. Let's get the homer pick out of the way here. But I just feel like I have confidence in the Iowa coaching staff to develop the defensive line with the younger players that are there, along with the tackles. So having that confidence to develop those specific position groups leads me to believe that the whole team front to back is very solid. I can't pick anything that I don't feel that good about. I mean, I feel good about almost everything. Whereas with Indiana, there's right now, until I see it, I think there's more of a glaring weakness with rushing attack and consistency on offense. They hit the big plays, but not consistently. And obviously that's tied with the rushing attack or lack thereof. So to me, that plays into my prediction. I've got Iowa 28, Indiana 24. Okay. I wouldn't touch this game as far as the Desert people are concerned, but I actually like it to go over and just a very slight cover for Iowa. All
right. Well, thanks again. There you have it. Jeffrey the Greek chooses the Hawkeyes And no shame, like I said earlier, no shame in picking the team that you're a fan of, especially because this game, I mean, the spread's only 3.5 right now. This is going to go either way, more than likely. I mean, you could see a blowout one way or the other, but in all likelihood, this is going to be something that comes down towards the end.
One would think.
So thanks again, Jeffrey. We'll let you go, and then Dustin and I are going to continue as we get ready to talk about some of the rest of the Big Ten, and because we got a whole slate of games starting on Thursday and then Friday, and then obviously the big days on Saturday. So thanks again, Jeffrey.
All right, I'm going to go find my 3-year-old. He's around here somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where he went after he made a surprise visit. So thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, bye.
All right. So once again, that was Jeffrey the Greek from the Eyes on Big podcast. He gave you his info on where to listen and all that stuff. And you can follow them on Twitter too, on @Jeffrey the Greek and then @Eyes on Big. And I'm pretty sure that's B1G, right, Dustin?
Yes, it is. Eyes on like B1G.
And that's why I thought it was Eyes on Big Ten.
And we'll have the link in the tweet so you can go and follow and listen to their podcast. They do a great job. And like I said, we got to give Big Kurt a shout out too, because he's a great co-host, and they were actually at the Nebraska-Illinois game. Big Kurt is a big Illinois fan, and he was able to see his team get a victory. So it was a good weekend all around, not just because we had Big Ten football back, we had fans in the stands, but then for him to see that big win live in person, that had to be awesome.
Now, and you may not know this, is his co-host also a former Illinois player?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm in the process of pulling up the schedule for the Big Ten coming up, because we are going to slowly make our way into Pick'em's here. We'll maybe talk about a couple of these games. You won't go far in depth, because I will go ahead and say I probably should have prefaced this last week. I'm not an expert on the entire Big Ten, like those down at Saturday Tradition and Dustin shooting everybody.
Yeah, I don't know about.
I do my best. I'm learning. Go ahead.
I don't know about. I was gonna say I don't know about being an expert, but I do my best. I do. I give it the best shot I can.
So I'm learning, and obviously I'm familiar with the Big Ten, but I'm not familiar with every single player on every team. And obviously this year doing this podcast, obviously watching Indiana every week, but I'm going to try to watch some of the bigger games and learn more of the different players throughout the Big Ten instead of just following the Hoosiers, so I can give you guys the best that I can offer. So I'm pulling up the Big Ten schedule for the week. Starting off on Thursday, interesting, we have Greg Schiano taking on Temple. I don't know if that's something I really want to dive into, but it'll be interesting to see what they'll look like in year two. Will Rutgers lay an egg, or will they show more consistent or be consistent from last year with fans in the stands now? It's going to be not even just for Rutgers. It's going to be interesting to see how many teams continue to show success with fans in the stands, specifically the teams, including Indiana, that aren't normally good, that were good last year with empty stands.
Right. Well, I suspect Rutgers, when they come out of that game, Greg Schiano has that team's bought in, right? We just talked about Illinois being bought in and Brett Bielema kind of setting the tone there. Greg Schiano set that tone at Rutgers last season, and I don't think that's something that's going to go anywhere. I think their culture's strong now. They may not win as many games, but I think their culture's still strong, and I think they still have – look, they've got a lot of experience on that roster. They do have some talent there. They were able to add some guys through the transfer portal, and they've got some experienced guys on that roster. So I do think that Rutgers comes out. I think they'll take care of business. It's going to be interesting because I do think Rutgers, as bad as they were under Chris Ash, they've got to 3-6 last season, and 3 of those games that they lost were determined by one possession. So they had an opportunity in 6 games. They could have been 6-3. Now you know what they say: if ifs and buts was candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But so that wasn't necessarily the case last season. But I do think that they'll build on that. I don't know that they get to bowl eligibility this year, but I think that they're hovering around that 5-6 win mark, and I think it starts off on the right foot on Thursday night.
And one thing, Dustin, we will do our pick'ems. I probably should have said this as well. Let's and it may be hard sometimes when we're just talking about the teams to not say who's going to win, but let's try to save the pick'ems. Obviously, Rutgers and Temple, you're probably going to pick Rutgers, but I mean, it could go the other way. So that's not like you gave away.
You never know.
It's not like you gave away Indiana, Iowa. Excuse me. But moving on to the Thursday night headliner, number 4 Ohio State at Minnesota, which I believe, and Reese Davis may be thinking this as well after hearing what he said about Oregon playing Ohio State in a couple weeks. But I definitely think that this game has the potential to be a lot closer than Ohio State wants it to be.
Oh, I think there's no question. You look at that line; it's 13.5. Boy, that's a really sizable line for a team that's ushering in a brand new quarterback. They have a brand new linebacker core. Obviously, they've got plenty of talent at the defensive line position, at the defensive end with guys like Zach Harrison and some of those names. Jack Sawyer's coming in as a freshman. They got some good players, Sevin Banks and Josh Proctor in the secondary. But hey, the question's going to be, what does C.J. Stroud look like? Now, to me, I have no doubt that Ryan Day is going to develop that position. You look at Dwayne Haskins in 2018. He was a first-year starter. He winds up being a Heisman finalist. Same thing with Justin Fields in 2019. He's a first-year starter. He goes on to become a Heisman finalist. So I don't have any doubt that by the end of the season, C.J. Stroud will be playing, maybe not at a Heisman level, but I think he's going to be playing at an all-Big Ten level. My question, though, is he's going to throw his first college pass. He's going to play in front of a packed stadium. It's on the road. And Minnesota's defense has gotten better. They got Boye Mafe, who's a freak athlete on the front line. They've got Dylan Pinkney, I pronounce his last name, transferring in from Clemson. You've got Moriano Sori-Marin at the linebacker position. You have Coney Durr in the secondary. So you have some really good players, but Minnesota's defense was so bad last season. Can they take that next step and defend a team like Ohio State? And I've compared this, and I'm blabbering on here and I'm running on, but I compare Ohio State this year to kind of what they did in 2014. Now, that's not to say they'll win a national championship, but they started the year in fall camp with Braxton Miller as the quarterback. He got injured. They had to go to JT Barrett. He played the entire season. He goes down in the Michigan game, and then Cardell Jones has to come in. Those three quarterbacks were good, but it didn't matter, right? Their talent on the outside was so good. You could throw the ball up to guys like Devin Smith or Michael Thomas, and you knew they were coming down with it. I think Ohio State has that benefit again this year, where if C.J. Stroud isn't just deliberately throwing the ball into the hands of the Gophers, you have a guy like Garrett Wilson. You have a guy like Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr. You have so much talent that if you just get the ball in the vicinity, you're going to give your receivers a chance. And they're so talented that I would say 8 or 9 times out of 10, they're going to come down with that football.
And obviously on the other side of things, Mohamed Ibrahim, I feel like everybody pronounces his name differently.
Ibrahim.
Oh, is it Ibrahim? Do you know that for sure? Okay, Mohamed Ibrahim. I'll have to remember that. But Mohamed Ibrahim from Minnesota, obviously Ohio State's defense is going to be laser focused on him. And because of that, Tanner Morgan's going to have to come out of his shell that he, for some reason, went into in 2020 and be his 2019 self if Minnesota wants to have a chance to win that game. So I think even though Mohamed Ibrahim will have to have a good game, if Tanner Morgan can at least have a decent game to complement that, Minnesota won't be in this game, I don't think.
Well, the interesting thing is when you look at the run game, it's going to be strength on strength. To me, Minnesota's offensive line, you get Curtis Dunlap back, you get Daniel Fa'alele back. They join Blaze Andrews and Connor Olson on the front line. That unit between the starting 5 and the guys behind them, they have 140 collegiate starts to them. So that's a lot of experience. They have some skill. They have plenty of experience. And then you have obviously the Big Ten running back of the year who rushed for over 1,000 yards in 7 games last season. The strength of Ohio State's defense, you could probably say, is going to be the defensive line. Now the question is the linebacker play, because those guys, they lost their entire linebacker core. So if Mohamed Ibrahim can get to that second level, I mean, he might be able to pick up quite a bit of yardage throughout a majority of that game. So I think it's very interesting in that regard. The other thing, when you talk about Tanner Morgan, remember last year they were going through an offensive coordinator change. They didn't have Tyler Johnson. They lost some pieces. This was a team that wasn't able to practice a whole lot because of the pandemic and some of the situations they were dealing with, even when the Big Ten did reinstate the season. So I think having a full year to kind of learn that offensive scheme, to kind of get to work with his new receiver group. I think Chris Ottman-Bell, if he's healthy, he's going to be a great weapon for them. But you're right, he can't panic with the football. He has to be accurate. He wasn't great at being accurate last season. I do think having a full year to kind of learn that system and be on target. And look, in that spring game, he looked really good. So you can never take too much away from that. But I do think maybe you don't see 2019 Tanner Morgan, but maybe you see an in-between of 2019 and 2020. And that might be good enough to scare the Buckeyes on Thursday night.
Yeah, especially because you're not going to see Tanner Morgan immediately evolve back into what he was. When he has the season that he did last year, this is game one. There's going to be some rust. Doesn't matter who it is. Michael Penix is probably going to have some rust, especially coming back from injury.
Mm-hmm.
But if Minnesota even wants to have a chance in this game, it has to be a shootout. There's no way Minnesota is going to win a game that's like 24-17. Tanner Morgan, Mohamed Ibrahim, and company are going to have to put up some points, and this game's going to have to be in the 30s or 40s if they want a chance in this game. And we can close the door on that game unless you have something else to add.
Not until we do the pick. I'll give it away if I try to add more.
Okay, that's fine. Moving on, and we won't spend forever on all these. We'll talk more about the bigger ones, and then once we get to the end, we'll go through and do our pick'ems. But Friday night, one Big Ten game. We have Michigan State at Northwestern. Northwestern's only a 3-point favorite in that game. I guess that kind of surprises me, but after thinking about it, Northwestern lost a lot. Now, they do have Brandon Joseph back. They're going to have to break in Hunter Johnson, and obviously a lot of their success is going to hinge on how good he is. But I think it'll be interesting to see, especially Michigan State Mel Tucker in year two, what this game looks like. Because I think there's a lot of question marks. I don't know whether if it'll be high scoring. Probably not, but I really just don't know. You have a lot of question marks in this game, I think.
Yeah, and both rosters are going to go through have gone through quite a bit of turnover because you had a lot of Northwestern's players. Their entire running back room. I mean, Cam Porter's injured. Drake Anderson and Isaiah Bowser both transferred after last season, so you're limited. You're basically got Evan Hull and some new faces behind him. Obviously, Peyton Ramsey gone. Defensively, you had 2/3 of the Irish law firm decide that they were going to go to the NFL, so you only have Chris Bergen back. They've got obviously the linebacker play under Pat Fitzgerald's always going to be good, but a lot of question marks. And then Michigan State, I think they're welcoming in 34 new faces between the recruiting class and through the transfer portal. Obviously, they've got some great players coming in. They got a guy in Quavaris Crouch out of Tennessee who was a really good player for the Vols in the SEC. You got Jacob Panishuk back on the defensive line. He's a really good player. So they've got some skill players. Offensively, we still don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Is it going to be Peyton Thorne, Anthony Russo? They do have some good playmakers at the running back position and at the wide receiver position, but it's also new. We don't really know what to expect, but I'll tell you this much. There is a revenge factor because the only regular season game that Northwestern lost a season ago was to Michigan State. That was only one of Mel Tucker's 2 wins last season, beating Northwestern and beating Michigan last year. So I can promise you that Pat Fitzgerald is going to put an extra emphasis on this game, trying to get revenge for that one loss last year.
It's weird. I feel like Northwestern, no matter what year it is, they always win a couple games that they have no business winning, and they always lose a couple games that they have no business losing. I believe one of the recent times that they attended the Big Ten championship, during that season, they lost to like Illinois State, an FCS program, and like maybe Duke. I mean, Duke's a Power 5 school, but they play them pretty frequently. But Northwestern's kind of like Iowa. They don't always start off hot, but they usually end up winning the games that matter in the Big Ten. So we can close the door on that game as well. Coming into the Saturday slate, tons of games and a lot of Power 5 matchups. Not even just in the Big Ten. Obviously, you have several of those, but you also have Oregon State and Purdue, West Virginia and Maryland. I'm going to go down these in order of when they are taking place. The big one that many are considering the Big Ten's game of the week, Penn State at Wisconsin. And here's one thing, and I don't want to speak too much about this. I mean, maybe I should just keep my mouth shut because I feel like I'm going to give away who I'm picking with this by talking about this game for some reason. But actually, you know what? I am going to keep my mouth shut. Dustin, do you have anything to say about Penn State and Wisconsin before I move on? Because I'll give my reason for why I'm picking the team for this and for this game once we get to pick'ems.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting matchup because these are two teams that did not perform at a high level a season ago, and I say that knowing Wisconsin finished 4-3. But when you look at the past, I mean, the expectation at Wisconsin is to be in the Big Ten championship game. The expectation at Penn State, even though they've only done it once in the last however many years, is to get to the Big Ten championship game, to take that next step and to beat Ohio State. And Penn State was 4-5 a year ago. Wisconsin was 4-3 a year ago, and I really like the running back situation at Penn State. I like their skill position players, Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington at the edge. My question about Penn State is, can Sean Clifford – I mean, this is really the question for both quarterbacks is, can Sean Clifford take the next step? Can he elevate his level of play? I think having Mike Yurcich on staff really is going to help him do that and develop into a better passer, into a more consistent player, cut down on the turnovers. Plus, like I said, he's got great skill position guys. He's got a good offensive line to work with there. So, and then on the other side, it's the same thing. Graham Mertz, excuse me. He's a quarterback that started off hot. He completed all but one pass, 20 of 21 in that season opener against Illinois, 5 touchdown passes. And then the rest of the season, kind of a roller coaster, right? But he did lose Danny Davis. He lost Kendrick Pryor. They didn't have a great rushing attack. This year they have Ches Malusi, the transfer in from Clemson. They have Jalen Berger behind him. So they do have a formidable rushing attack, and you don't ever have to worry about Wisconsin's offensive line. So, to me, there are a lot of similarities in this game to the Iowa-Indiana game, where I think it's a lot of strength on strength. And we're going to find out a lot about those two teams early in week 1.
Yeah, I don't know that my explanation will be as educated as yours, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Educated.
Yeah. After that, there's Western Michigan and Michigan. Michigan's a 17-point favorite in that. Not much to talk about there, you would think. Nebraska at Fordham, also you wouldn't expect much to talk about there unless for some reason, if Nebraska were to lose that, Scott Frost would be gone. That's a game Nebraska has no reason to lose.
I would think so, yes.
No Big Ten team has a reason to lose to Fordham. Is Fordham an FCS school?
Yep.
I believe they are. That's what I thought.
Used to be coached by Joe Moorhead, former offensive coordinator at Penn State, now the offensive coordinator at Oregon.
Oregon, yeah. I thought he was Oregon. All right, skipping over Indiana, Iowa, because we've already talked about that, and then we'll bring that up again in Pick'ems. West Virginia at Maryland. I also think this is a very interesting matchup of two programs that I feel like are on very equal footing. Both teams have done very well in recruiting over the past couple of years. Maryland seems to be they've done well on the recruiting front, but it hasn't always shown up on the field. I think Talia Tagovailoa is. Did you say something?
No, I just agreed with your point that they've recruited well, but they have not done well on the field.
This game is very difficult for me to decide who I think is going to win, and I'm not going to say right now, obviously, because Maryland, and I don't know as much about West Virginia, but I do feel like they're on some very equal footing. Maryland hasn't proven themselves to be what I think their potential actually is. I think Maryland could be anywhere between like a 7-5, 8-4 team to a 4-8 team on the other end of the spectrum.
I would say 2-10. I think coaching matters. I think coaching matters that much, and I haven't seen it from Mike Locksley yet. I mean, that doesn't mean it can't happen, but you look at his time at New Mexico, you look at his first couple of years at Maryland, it hasn't been pretty. So you have to wonder, can he just flip the switch like that? I mean, maybe he can. I don't know. It's not impossible, but Maryland's offensive line is atrocious. I mean, it's probably one of the worst in the Big Ten. I don't know how that team's going to be able to run the football. They do have some really good playmakers at wide receiver. I mean, Raheem Jarrett, Dante Demas, Jayshon Jones. They've got Darryl. They have some playmakers at that. Brian Cobbs is another one. They've got some skill players there. I just don't know how much time Talia Tagovailoa is going to have to throw the ball, and if they're going to establish a rush. If I could talk and not stutter, that'd be helpful. If they can establish a run game, the other part of it is Maryland's defense, I think, looks better based on what we've seen from fall camp and then from spring ball. But it's been so bad in the past that I don't know how much better. I don't know if better is going to be good or if it's going to be formidable or if it's still going to be bad. So I have a lot of question marks about Maryland heading into this season. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're a team that could win 8 games. I think they do have that much talent. I disagree on their floor. I think that
It's
they could
interesting,
be.
though. 2-10.
I think they could be
Sense.
much worse than
You make a lot
4-8.
of good points. And then the last Power 5 versus Power 5 matchup we have Oregon State at Purdue, which is something that I had some trouble whenever because I made my picks previously before we started this, and Dustin, maybe you have as well.
I just fly by the seat of my pants.
See the video version. He's just nodding his head no if you're not watching the video version of the show. But Oregon State at Purdue, it's interesting. A Big Ten Pac-12 matchup prior to having the Big Ten Pac-12 alliance,
or,
ACC alliance, whatever that ends up being.
Yeah.
But Purdue, like Maryland, has a lot of question marks. Did they name a starting quarterback today or the other day?
Yeah. It's going to be Jack Plummer, but Jeff Brom did say he won't be afraid to play multiple quarterbacks. So we could see 2 or 3 guys.
And that's the problem with Purdue throughout the entire Jeff Brom era, and maybe even before that during Darrell Hazell. Why can't Jeff Brom, somebody who's known for developing offense and quarterbacks, get his guy? And I think Scott Frost has the same problem with Adrian Martinez, sort of. Like, I don't think in the sense it's not the exact same situation, but I feel like Adrian Martinez is just there because he's just been the starter. You know what I mean? There's no reason to go with somebody else because he's the experienced guy. Because if you put somebody else in, you wipe away all of that and you may get somebody worse. But we're not going to talk about Nebraska anymore. For some reason, Nebraska just has a weird way in getting into your brain all of the time. It's the same with Scott Frost. Back to Purdue. Jack Plummer and any quarterback that Purdue has had, it seems like they haven't been able to reach their full potential. You wouldn't have expected going into Tom Allen and Jeff Brom, their tenures, that Tom Allen would have the better quarterback situation than Jeff Brom.
That's correct. But outside of Jeff Brom's first year, they dealt with so many injuries. So his first season, even his first season, David Blau when he first got to Purdue, he was playing both David Blau and Elijah Sindelar, but Blau got hurt and then so did Sindelar late in that season. And then I don't know if they've had a quarterback make it through an entire season. They've always dealt with injuries. I've heard this argument before, so you're not alone in the sense that they can't develop a quarterback, but it's not, as far as I know, it's not. This isn't by choice. This is by injury. You can't play somebody who's been consistently hurt. So they've had
That's fair. Fair.
They've had to rotate Aiden O'Connell. They've had to rotate Jack Plummer, as I mentioned, Elijah Sindelar, David Blau for year.
Or O'Connell. Wasn't Aiden O'Connell? Is it Connell or O'Connell? Now I'm confused.
O'Connell. Yep. O'Connell.
Was he originally a walk-on before he started starting a lot?
A walk-on player. I can't remember if he was a walk-on freshman or not when he took over that job when Plummer and Sindelar went down. But yeah, and he was committed to a Division III school. So he was and he came in and he led them to 2 straight wins. One was against Northwestern on the road. I think there was another one that he won too. But I mean, he came in and he played well. This is what I'm saying though. Like Jeff Brom, he doesn't need a 5-star quarterback. Would it be helpful? Yes. But he has those guys playing very well. He surrounds them with great player makers at the wide receiver position. The offensive line for them has been so bad. I mean, it's like Maryland. They don't have hardly any depth. If somebody goes down on that offensive line, Purdue's in big time trouble. I mean, they're in trouble in the first place. But if somebody gets hurt or if multiple guys go down, I mean, you might as well just put in a turnstile because I don't know who's going to block anybody on that offensive line. And this is why we talk about quarterbacks. They can't run the damn ball. I mean, they're averaging less than 83 yards per game over the last 2 seasons. This is like Indiana. You don't have to run for 200 yards per game. You just have to make it a threat. It just has to be there. And it hasn't been there for the last 2-3 seasons. So those are my questions about Purdue. I think that Purdue has the potential to be back in bowl eligibility, but they have to secure some things on the offensive line, and they have to get back to having a strong run game. I do think they'll be better defensively. They made a lot of good hires. They made a lot of good additions to the transfer portal. Jeff Brom's going to have his hand in the defense. I expect that aspect to be better, but if you're averaging under 85 yards a game again and you finish dead last in the Big Ten, it's going to be a long season.
Yeah, I agree. And so moving on from that, before we get into our pick'ems, our last game, Illinois home against UTSA. One thing I find interesting about this, and I'm just now seeing this, Illinois is only a 6-point favorite, less than a touchdown against UTSA. I don't know much about UTSA, but you would think that after the showing that they had against Nebraska, that they would have given them more love. Now, the other end of that, I feel like, do they think Nebraska was just not as good as they thought they could have been, and Illinois is just maybe a little bit of a step above Nebraska, and Illinois is not as good as they may have actually looked?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know much about UTSA either, so I would expect that Illinois. I would have expected this to be maybe not like a 2 or 3 touchdown game, but I would have expected it to be around the 10.5, 11.5 line somewhere. Maybe a touchdown and a field goal. So I am surprised by that, but you never know. The people in Vegas always know something, right?
They do, and they want people to take those unders or overs. I don't know the least bit thing about betting. I learned last year what a parlay was, so I can explain what that is. But I've never placed a parlay. I've never made a sports bet other than on horse racing. So I couldn't give you my insight on what to take on the over under, all that kind of stuff. But with that, let's go ahead and move into our pick'ems. Now I want to set this up to where I want to alternate who goes first, but I need to make sure that I give you the last pick for the Indiana Iowa, because one thing that's fun, if you're watching the YouTube version of this show, each week during either the game of the week or Indiana's game, depending on if they have a potentially close matchup, Dustin has a shirt for every single Big Ten team, and he's going to put that shirt on or unzip whatever he might have on over it to reveal who he's choosing in that game.
Yeah, we'll stick with the wearing some sort of over and then unzipping, because nobody wants to see me put on a shirt, take off a shirt, put on a shirt. That whole process is going to lose you viewers and listeners and all that. We just don't need that.
So I guess I'll just go ahead and go down the line, and I'll have you start for the first one, and then I'll go second, and then we'll kind of like serpentine it. And then when we get to Indiana, Iowa, however it ends up being, I'll still start first, and then you can give your prediction. So starting off, going in order, Temple at Rutgers.
I'm going to go with Rutgers. I think that the Schiano factor, they're going to chop. 1-0 Rutgers. And
actually, this is going to be actually occurring while we're doing this. I need to write this down because we're keeping track of our standings. Last week, we took the opposite end. I took Nebraska. I honestly didn't want to. I should have made the pick ahead of time, but I wanted to be different so I could see if I could get a leg up on Dustin. Dustin has the early 1-0 lead with the Nebraska one. So Dustin, got to make a column for Dustin, going to make a column for me. I guess I'll type it in as I need to figure it out. But I'm also going to take Rutgers in this game. I don't really think Temple's going to give them too much trouble, especially after how good Rutgers improved last season. So we'll see how that game goes. Next, we're already jumping into a big one. Number 4, Ohio State at Minnesota. Who do you got?
I think
actually, it's my turn first, isn't it?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Serpentina. So even though earlier I said Minnesota can have a chance in this game, I ultimately think Ohio State's going to win. Even if C.J. Stroud doesn't have the best day, they have plenty of weapons on defense and offense. Master T could go off in the running back position, so I'm going with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think that when you look at Ohio State, they've got too many weapons, too many options. I think that this is nowhere close to that 13.5-point spread. I think this is going to be I shouldn't say nowhere close. I think this is going to be a one-possession game. Maybe Ohio State scores late to kind of put it out of reach. But I think that I think Ohio State wins, but Minnesota covers.
Interesting. Okay, moving on to our next one, Michigan State at Northwestern. I'm going with the Wildcats on this one.
Yeah, I think Northwestern as well. I think there's that revenge factor. I think Hunter Johnson maybe has bounced back from that 2019 season. I do like the Wildcats in this one.
And I realized I should have had you go first on that one, so I'll let you go twice on the next couple. Got number 19 Penn State at number 12 Wisconsin.
This is one
I'm interested to see what you're going to say, because I have an interesting take on here.
If you ask me this every day, I'm going to change my answer every day. I think Penn State wins. I think Penn State has the talent. I think they're pissed off about finishing 4-5, and I think they want to finish on the right foot. So I'm going to take the Nittany Lions in that one.
And I'm also taking the Nittany Lions on this one. Let me explain why, because I didn't talk much about this game earlier. I definitely think Wisconsin has the potential to live up to this number 12 ranking that they've been given. But right now, coming into the season, after what happened last year, I know they had COVID problems, and I know that probably played a pretty large factor in how their season went. But there is absolutely no reason that Wisconsin should be a top 12 team right now in America. I definitely think they can be. They have a lot of good weapons. Jalen Berger's is pretty good. Graham Mertz, if he develops, could be really, really good. But I think Penn State, at the end of last year, showed a ton more promise at the end of the season. I think they have a lot of momentum going their way. I don't care that this game is in Camp Randall. I think Penn State will win this one. So
yeah, I mean,
that's right. You already gave your pick. So
yeah, I mean, I can see, like I said, tomorrow you ask me, and I'd probably pick Wisconsin. I think this is a dead even matchup.
And especially when comparing it in terms of how Indiana played each team, Penn State outplayed Indiana and should have won had they not made the dire mistake of running into the end zone. That's the only reason that Penn State went into the spiral that they did and that Indiana was able to skyrocket into the success that they had. As much as we want to say that it's all because of the pylon dive, obviously that had to happen too. But that pylon dive never would have happened had Penn State not screwed up in that game. Wisconsin, on the other hand, when Indiana played them, they handily defeated Wisconsin, especially on the defensive side. I mean, 3 points. I mean, we're barely a decade removed from Indiana giving up 83 to Wisconsin. Yep. I mean, just think about that transformation. That made me smile just thinking about it, because that was my first year paying attention to Indiana football. Dustin, I've told you before.
Yeah,
when I became an Indiana football fan, obviously I was a young buck. I didn't have the cognizance and the reasoning and understanding that I have now on why things like that happen. But the fact that that's in the past and Indiana was able to hold Wisconsin to 3 points last year, that goes to show that Indiana's come a long way. Obviously, we're getting off topic. We're doing pick'ems right now. Let's go to Western Michigan at Michigan. Dustin, go ahead and give me your next one.
Yeah, Michigan. I can't imagine that kind of upset. We still have a lot of questions about Michigan, but I don't have any questions about them beating Western Michigan this weekend.
Yeah, this is another one of those situations like Fordham with Nebraska. If Jim Harbaugh found a way to lose this game, things wouldn't be looking good up in Ann Arbor. Fordham and Nebraska. There we go. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. The Cornhuskers should come away with this win.
Yep, no doubt about it. That should be an easy W, for the easiest W of the season for Nebraska.
Next, West Virginia at Maryland. I have a feeling where you're going with this, Dustin, based on how you were talking. And I think I'm going the same direction you. I could be wrong. You could prove opposite of what I'm thinking here, but I'm taking the Mountaineers in this game.
I will also be taking West Virginia. I don't even know much about West Virginia. I just don't have much faith in what I've seen from Maryland. I mean, would I be surprised if they win? No, but at the same time, I haven't seen much from them in the last 2 seasons, so they need to make a big jump. Maybe they'll do it this year.
Next up, we have the Beavers of Oregon State traveling to West Lafayette to take on Purdue. One that I kind of wrestled with for a little bit, because last year I knew Oregon State defeated Oregon in the Apple Cup or whatever they call that rivalry game. But outside of that, they only won one other game. So, I mean, obviously I'm thinking Oregon State had the rivalry motivation for that one. I'm taking the Boilermakers in this game.
Yeah, well, Apple Cup is Washington State. Oregon State used to be called
Civil War. It's a Civil War.
Yeah, but I think
I had the right part of the country though. I was very close.
You had the right conference. You were just a state above, state too high. I don't know if they still call it the Civil War, if they renamed it, but so I don't know what it is.
It seems like something that would be inappropriate nowadays for some reason.
I think they probably rename that. But I agree. I think Purdue wins. I think Purdue has enough talent in the passing attack. I think the defense is going to look better. I think it will be kind of a hard-fought, close game, but I think Purdue does win.
And then one more before we head on to our game of the week, UTSA at Illinois. Like as I said earlier, I was surprised that the spread was as close as it was. So I'm taking the Fighting Illini.
Yep, I'm going to take Illinois too. I think that I don't know about comfort. 6.5 scares me. Maybe the people in Vegas know something, but I still think Illinois escapes with a win.
All right, and I realized I did this entire thing not even the way that I wanted to. I ended up picking a lot of the ones first, and then I'll get that down the more that we do this. Hosting
it doesn't influence me at all.
See, and that's why I made my picks ahead of time, because I didn't want to pick somebody different just because it was going to be close to try to have that upper hand. So, our game of the week, Indiana at Iowa. I'm so excited for this game. No matter the outcome, I mean, as long as Indiana doesn't get hammered, I feel like I'm going to have a good time with this. But I am going to take the Indiana Hoosiers in this one because Michael Penix, Tom Allen said he's 100% ready to go. And I know he can't be the only impact player for the Hoosiers, but I think he does just enough to help Indiana get over and beat the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, so there are a lot of factors. We've talked about this game. We've dived into it. We had Jeffrey the Greek on to break down the Iowa side. We've talked about the Indiana side. So I guess I'll see if I can, get this up so you can see my pick
Let's
here.
do this.
And
it's red.
Maybe the Adidas goes with it, but I'm going to pick the Hoosiers in this one. I'll just stand
there
up.
There we go.
My Indiana Hoosiers shirt. I like the fact. So a couple things, because I do think this is close, and I don't want to rule out the fact. I do think Iowa can win. Don't get me wrong. Indiana has to play extremely well, but the things that I have question marks about in terms of Iowa is, are you going to start the season off hot? I mean, can you come out of the gates ready to go? Because we saw what happened last year on the road against Purdue in week 1. That was an Iowa team that was far superior in talent, in ability, in scheme to Purdue last season, and they still lost that game. So that is still fresh in my mind. Spencer Petras has never played in front of a crowd before. I do have some questions. Even though I think the offensive line is going to be good, I think the defensive line is going to be good. How good can they be early in the year? And then their pass catchers. I mean, they have Tyrone Tracy, they have Nico Reganey, but outside of that, I mean, you throw in Sam Laporta. They do have some good weapons there, but they're kind of unproven. So for those reasons, I do think Indiana has the upper hand. I think the defense is a little bit better in terms of talent and experience. I think Indiana's run game is going to be better with Stephen Carr, and then I think the offensive line has gotten better. But I think this is going to be a 27-24 game. I think somewhere in that ballpark. I think it's going to be close. I don't think Indiana is going to be able to hit the deep ball on multiple times and rack up 40 points. This is going to be a fun game. Wouldn't be surprised if Iowa wins. But again, what I saw last year in week 1 when Iowa played a conference opponent, what Indiana has in the secondary and the defensive side of the football, what they have returning the quarterback advantage, that's what gives me not what gives me, but that's what has me picking Indiana in this first game of the season.
There you have it. I choose Indiana. Dustin chooses Indiana. Jeffrey the Greek, our friend from Eyes on Big, chooses the Hawkeyes. And Dustin, I don't know if you realize, but we actually picked the exact same pick for everything. We're dead even this week.
Well, so I'm going to still have a one-game lead.
You will have a one-game lead regardless, but maybe we'll get some more parity in the following weeks. Again, thanks for listening this week. Looking forward to this Indiana-Iowa game. We'll see you next time. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a Hoosier win. If not, we'll keep it moving on. We'll keep doing this. We're not solely hinging on the success of Indiana. But until next time, keep listening to Indiana Sports Beat Monday through Friday. And we'll be here next week. Y'all have a good one.